The fluorescent lights in the grocery store buzzed faintly, adding to the hum of chatter and distant beeps of barcode scanners. Minding her own business, Melissa Jones, a 32-year-old African-American woman with a calm demeanor and a knack for blending into the background, was scrutinizing a pile of organic avocados. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses and tilted her head slightly, trying to spot the ripest one. From the outside, she looked like just another customer trying to survive the overpriced trap of healthy eating. On the inside, a goddamn ticking time bomb. Melissa was a CIA operative under deep cover, trained to neutralize threats without breaking a sweat. Enter Jack Whitman, 45 years old, white, and carrying the kind of attitude that screams, "I peaked in high school." Jack wasn't just having a bad day, he was the bad day. Shuffling down the aisle with a cart loaded haphazardly with junk food and budget beer, he was muttering curses into his phone. His raspy voice cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. Yeah, I'll pay you back. Jesus, get off my back," he snapped into the receiver, his face turning an unpleasant shade of red. As he swung the cart around, his frustration lashed out in every direction, including Melissa's. Her ankle met the cold, unforgiving edge of his metal cart. She hissed in pain, dropping the avocado she had been so carefully inspecting. "Excuse me?" Melissa said, her voice polite but laced with a warning. Jack didn't even glance her way. Instead, he let out a scoff so condescending it might as well have come with a billboard saying, "I'm a jerk, and proud of it." "Watch where you're going, lady," he grumbled, yanking his cart forward as though she were the one inconveniencing him. Melissa straightened, her sunglasses slipping down just enough for her piercing gaze to lock onto him. For a brief moment, she debated letting it slide. After all, keeping a low profile was practically second nature to her. But something about Jack's smugness, that entitlement practically oozing out of his pores, made her pause. "I think you hit me," she said, keeping her tone cool, though her patience was already wearing thin. Jack finally looked up, his face twisting into a mockery of confusion. "Oh, so now it's my fault?" he said loudly, making sure everyone in the aisle could hear. "Maybe you shouldn't be standing in the middle of the damn store like you own the place." Melissa blinked. Did this guy just wake up and choose violence? Before she could respond, Jack took it up another notch. "People like you," he sneered, gesturing vaguely in her direction. "Always think the world owes you something." Melissa froze. The comment hung in the air like a bad smell, drawing the attention of a couple of nearby shoppers. One woman gasped quietly, clutching her purse a little tighter. "Excuse me," Melissa said again, this time with a sharp edge to her voice. Jack rolled his eyes dramatically, as if he were the victim in all this. "You heard me." The tension in the aisle thickened. A man in a flannel jacket, clearly sensing the growing hostility, muttered, "Dude, maybe just let it go." Jack ignored him, of course, because of course he did. Melissa took a deep breath. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to de-escalate. She had been trained for moments like this, moments when walking away could prevent unnecessary chaos. But there was something about Jack's tone, his absolute audacity, that made her fingers twitch with suppressed irritation. "Let me make something clear," she said, her voice steady and measured, like a warning shot across the bow. "I didn't bump into you. You ran your cart into me. And now, instead of apologizing like a decent human being, you're yelling at me like it's my fault." Jack laughed. Actually laughed. It was the kind of laugh that said, "I'm about to make this worse, and I don't care." "Oh, I see how it is," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Miss High and Mighty thinks she's too good for a little accountability." Classic. Melissa's jaw tightened. The bystanders in the aisle were no longer pretending not to watch. One teenager even whipped out his phone, the telltale glow of a recording app lighting up his screen. Great. Now this was turning into a public spectacle. Jack leaned in slightly, a smug grin plastered across his face. "What are you gonna do about it, huh?" Melissa's instincts kicked in. She straightened her posture, her eyes narrowing behind her sunglasses. She didn't need to do anything drastic, not yet, but she wasn't about to let this overgrown toddler steamroll her in front of an audience. "Here's what I'm going to do," she said, her tone ice cold. "I'm going to stand here, mind my business, and wait for you to grow up. How's that sound?" Jack's grin faltered, if only for a second. Then, as if on cue, he decided to double down. "You've got some mouth on you," he said, his voice rising. "Bet you think you're untouchable." Melissa didn't flinch. If anything, she looked bored. "And I bet you think you're intimidating," she shot back. "Spoiler alert, you're not." The flannel guy muttered, "Damn," under his breath, clearly impressed by her composure. Jack, on the other hand, was far from impressed. His face flushed with anger, and he took a step closer. Melissa's muscles tensed, her training screaming at her to stay alert. She wasn't scared. Not even close. But she was ready. Ready for whatever idiotic move Jack was about to make next, and judging by the way his hand gripped the edge of his cart, it was going to be very, very stupid. The grocery aisle was now a full-blown stage, and Jack Whitman was determined to be the main act. His voice echoed louder than it had any right to, and his body language screamed, "Pick me, I dare you." Meanwhile, Melissa Jones stood like a fortress, calm, unshaken, but oh so ready to flip the script if this clown pushed her any further. "Lady, you're really testing my patience," Jack sneered, leaning in just a little too close for comfort. "You think you can talk to me like that and get away with it?" Melissa tilted her head slightly, her sunglasses slipping down her nose just enough to reveal a flash of her piercing eyes. "I don't just think it," she said coolly. "I know it." That hit a nerve. Jack's face twisted into something between a snarl and a pout. He wasn't used to people standing up to him, especially not with this level of calm. He was the kind of guy who thrived on making others squirm. But Melissa? She wasn't squirming. Not even close. The crowd in the aisle had grown. Phones were out, recording every second of this train wreck. Whispers floated through the air like little sparks, fueling the tension. Is he seriously picking a fight in the produce section? Who is this guy? She's handling this like a pro. Jack, of course, noticed the attention and decided to double down. Because why not? When you're already neck-deep in stupidity, might as well keep digging. "Oh, look at this," he said, gesturing dramatically at the onlookers. "We've got an audience now. Bet you're loving this, huh?" He turned back to Melissa, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Go ahead, lady. Give him a show." Melissa crossed her arms, the faintest hint of a smirk tugging at her lips. "Funny," she said. "I was just about to say the same to you." That did it. Jack's ego shattered like cheap glass. He slammed his cart into the display of oranges next to him, sending a cascade of fruit rolling across the floor. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A kid in a hoodie muttered, "Oh, shit," as an orange bumped into his sneaker. "Clean it up!" Jack barked at no one in particular, his face redder than a traffic light. He looked back at Melissa, his eyes blazing. "You think you're better than me?" he spat. "You're nothing." Melissa didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "And yet here we are," she said, her voice steady as a rock. "You throwing a tantrum, me standing here. Who's really nothing?" The air practically crackled with tension. The crowd was eating this up, their phones capturing every moment. Somewhere in the back, the store manager had finally decided to intervene. A balding man in a wrinkled polo shirt. He shuffled over, his face a mix of panic and regret. "Sir," the manager started, his voice trembling just enough to give away how much he hated this part of his job. "I'm going to have to ask you to calm down." Jack whipped around so fast it was a wonder he didn't pull something. "Calm down," he barked, throwing his arms wide. "You're telling me to calm down? How about you tell her to stop provoking me?" The manager blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I don't think she's—" "Don't think?" Jack interrupted, his voice rising. "Then maybe you shouldn't speak, huh? Just do your damn job and stay out of my way." Melissa let out a low whistle, shaking her head. "Wow," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You really are the full package, aren't you? Entitled and rude." Jack's attention snapped back to her, his fists clenching at his sides. For a split second, Melissa thought he might actually try something. Her body tensed, ready to move if he did, but instead he grabbed a can of soup from the nearest shelf and hurled it to the floor. The crash echoed like a gunshot, and the crowd collectively recoiled. "That's it," the manager exclaimed, finally finding his backbone. "Sir, you need to leave, now," Jack laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that grated on everyone's nerves. "Oh, I'm leaving," he said, his voice low and venomous, "but not before I deal with her." He took a step toward Melissa, and the tension in the aisle shot through the roof. The crowd held its breath. A few people whispered to each other, debating whether to step in or call for help. Melissa didn't move, didn't even blink. Her mind was racing, calculating every possible move Jack might make and every counter she could throw at him. She wasn't scared, not of him, but she knew this was a dangerous line they were walking. "Think very carefully about your next move," she said, her voice calm but laced with steel, "because I promise you, you won't like where it ends." Jack froze, his confidence faltering for the first time. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in her gaze must have struck a nerve, but just as quickly as the hesitation appeared, it vanished, replaced by a sneer. "You don't scare me," he said. Melissa's smirk widened. Just a fraction. "I should." And just like that, the tension reached its boiling point. All eyes were on Jack and Melissa, the air thick with anticipation. Something was about to give, and everyone knew it. It was just a matter of when and how hard. Jack lunged, clumsy and furious, but Melissa moved like water, quick and precise. She sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. The knife he thought no one saw clattered to the floor, silencing the crowd. "Big guy with a knife, huh?" Melissa said, holding him in place as he dropped to his knees. "Bet you feel real tough now." "Get off me," Jack shouted, squirming in her grip. She leaned closer, her voice low and calm. "You can wait here for the cops, or make this worse for yourself. Your call." The crowd erupted into cheers as the police arrived, cuffing Jack, while he whined about how it wasn't his fault. An officer approached Melissa, clearly impressed. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Melissa adjusted her sunglasses. "I'm good, thanks for showing up." As Jack was dragged out, the onlookers applauded her one last time. Someone yelled, "You're a badass!" Melissa smirked, grabbed her groceries, and walked to her car, blending back into the ordinary world. When a teenager called after her, "You're a legend," she smiled and replied, "Yeah, well, don't pick fights in grocery stores. Bad idea."